Hola Tanya, ¿qué tal estás? Muchas gracias por visitar mi perfil. Oh, no, no. L'ambiente o il cibo. Stiamo provando un nuovo tipo di proteina. Non so se aiuta, ma se l'ambiente non c'è niente da fare. Per me no, ma per Peppa sì, perché in Arizona non aveva allergie e qui sì. This week, I'm going to be trying to complete the 40 hours, 7 days language challenge, which basically means that I'm going to be trying to squeeze 40 hours of language learning into my week. A normal week where I have to do work, I have to take care of my dog, socialize hopefully, and just be a responsible adult. I'm doing this challenge with my friend Joe, who is the creator behind one of my favorite language learning channels here on YouTube. So definitely go check out her video and the videos that she's made before, because this is not the first time that she's doing the challenge. And I believe that originally the challenge was created by the channel Language Come Up, which I'm also going to leave the links to. I consider myself to be a very consistent and active language learner. I study or do something for my languages, at least the languages that I'm choosing to focus on right now, pretty much every single day. However, I am not currently tracking the time that I spend on my languages. I have not been doing that for the last 2.5 years, because there was a time when I was tracking my study time. But I'm currently not doing that. So to be completely honest with you, I have no idea how much time I'm spending on my languages. And so partially because 40 hours does sound like a lot, and I'm not 100% sure I'll be able to reach that number. Partially I'm doing this challenge to even figure out how much time I usually spend and how much time I could spend if I really, really tried. I think originally immersion was not supposed to count towards the challenge, and honestly, I will not be following that rule, because I think that if I don't count things like listening to audiobooks while I'm doing other things like washing the dishes, for example, or walking my dog, it doesn't even make sense to even start the challenge, because I'm not gonna get nowhere near the number that is required. So yeah, I don't think that's realistic for me to not count immersion activities, and also honestly I don't see why I would not want to count them. And in terms of the activities, I kind of have an idea of what I want to do, and I think that most of the activities are going to reflect my personal curriculum. I've talked about it in my previous videos if you are not sure what it is, but basically there are things that I want to work on and I have been working on for the last couple of months, and I want to continue doing that. But obviously that is not going to get me to the number of hours that I need, so I will have to get creative with finding other things, or maybe trying to spend more time on some of the activities that I'm already doing. We will see. But for now, the plan is to have about 6 hours a day on weekdays and then 5 hours a day on the weekends, just because on the weekends I tend to be out of the house, socializing more, just doing things where it's not necessarily as easy to fit language learning into those things. Right now, it's still morning. I have been able to do some things already. I have had a 30-minute Italian lesson on a talkie, and I also have spent about 50 minutes so far listening to an audiobook also in Italian called Io non ho paura, and I'll probably continue doing that while I'm cleaning for a little bit, and then we'll see what else I come up with. So, I've been reading this book by Paolo Giordano for 2 weeks now, and the goal originally was to finish it within a week. That did not happen, but I have about 25 pages left, so I think it should be doable to finish it right now. I'm not sure how much time it's gonna take, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Honestly, have no idea. I never really try to track my reading speed, so I guess we'll find out in a second. Well, you will find out in the second I will have to actually read it. ed è in qualche punto del percorso a ritroso per l'Europa, in quella coda del nostro viaggio insieme, che mi viene in mente la risposta semplice, semplicissima alla domanda di Moon, la risposta che non sono riuscito a darle al ristorante poche ore fa. Scrivo di ogni cosa che mi ha fatto piangere. So I just finished the book. I didn't like it as much as I hoped I would. Basically, this book is very contemporary. It takes us through the period of 2015 to 2022, I believe. And so it touches upon a lot of modern events. Like it starts with the wave of attacks in Europe. Then it also mentions the climate crisis and how countries are trying or not trying to address it. Then we have the Me Too movement, we have the pandemic. We also look back on some things that happened in the 20th century, namely the invention of the atomic bomb. And at the same time, you have this character, this man, who is also going through like a personal crisis. And I think this idea of like navigating your own personal problems and at the same time living in a time that is extremely, traumatizing, that was like an idea that I was very attracted to when I was reading the book. But I do think that I like the idea a little more than I like how it was executed. Good morning. So today is day 2 of the challenge, and let's see how I did yesterday. If my calculations are correct, I spent 4 hours and 40 minutes on my languages, mostly on Italian. A lot of the heavy lifting was done by the audiobook that I was listening to, and that kind of makes sense because it was the easiest thing to do. I was doing it while I was doing some like chores around the house. I also had to go to an event later in the evening, and while commuting I was listening to the audiobook as well, so it kind of makes sense. Another 32 minutes were spent on one of my grammar textbooks. I feel like I don't even make videos that often, but whenever I do make them, it feels like I always mention this textbook for some reason. And basically I've been working on it for a couple of months now. This is like the second part. I finished the first part earlier this year, and now I'm very close to finishing this second part, and I hope that if not this week, probably not this week, then at least by the end of November I'll be able to do it. What else? So you saw me finish my book. I spent 59 minutes on that, and then another 25 minutes were spent on Link, which I currently use for reading in German, and then another 34 minutes I spent on italki. So yeah, I didn't reach 6 hours like I was supposed to, but honestly I think that 4 hours and 40 minutes is really good. Of course, like I said, the audiobook did most of the heavy lifting, but I actually am really liking it, and so I'm really excited to see where it's going, but we'll see.
And so from that moment on, so what happened was, in terms of how I started, I went back to the academy, and I was in my little room, and in 1 minute, really, I started listing all the apartments where I happened to live for years or for months, and there were more than 30 apartments.
Another thing is that yesterday I went to a book talk with an Italian author, but the talk was in English, and he was interviewed by Jhumpa Lahiri, which, if you didn't know, this is a Jhumpa Lahiri Stan household. I kind of think that she and her book In Altre Parole is what made me so passionate about Italian literature. And the author that she was interviewing, it was about the release of the English translation of one of his books, is Andrea Baiani. I was not really familiar with him or his work, but after the presentation, I do think I want to read the book at some point. The only thing is that I'm currently doing my 100 days of reading challenge. The idea of the challenge is that I have to read every single day for 100 days until the end of the year. I think I've actually mentioned it in videos. I was kind of doubting which language to choose because I started the year with the assumption that I would be doing the challenge in German, but unfortunately or that's just how it happened. I took a big break from German, and so I didn't make as much progress as I hoped. So doing this challenge in German would mean that I would probably have to read stuff that I'm not very interested in, but stuff that like matches my level, right? And I didn't really want to do that. So yeah, back in September, I was trying to figure out what to do until one day I just looked at my shelves and I was like, the most logical thing to do would be to do it in Italian again, even though I did it last year, but this time to limit myself only to the books I own, because I do own quite a lot of books in Italian. And yeah, right now what I am doing for my challenge is basically reading Italian books that I own. So Tasmania was one of those books, and then another book, I think the next book that I'm going to try to tackle will be this book, which is called Il giardino dei Finzi-Contini by Giorgio Bassani. But right now that's not what I'm going to be doing. Today I don't have my Italki classes, but I do have a class in person. So since October of this year, I've been basically taken these in-person classes here in New York City. They're group classes and it's only once a week for an hour and a half. And today is the day when I have to go. I actually only have 3 weeks left, so it's gonna be this week and then 2 more and then we're done. I initially signed up for the B2 class, but after the first lesson, the teacher reached out to me and she said, hey, I think you belong in the C1 class. Go try that, and if you find it too difficult, you can always come back. And then when I actually went to the C1 class, it was like perfectly fine. So yeah, that's what we're doing right now. I'm doing the C1 course. The textbook that we are using is called Nuovissimo, progetto italiano. It's kind of funny because back in April of this year, I think I actually bought the B1/B2 textbook. It's like both levels in one book, and I was planning to start and finish it and then start the C1 textbook, but I think I didn't even finish the first unit, and then I just let it sit on my bookshelf for like months. And then when I started this course, they told me like, oh, we're gonna be using Nuovissimo progetto, but the C1 textbook. And I was a little mad at myself for not finishing the B1/B2 textbook, because now if I finish the C1 textbook, I don't really necessarily see myself going to the B1/B2 one, even though there's probably some information that I would benefit from, but overall the level now does feel a bit too easy. So we'll see, maybe I'll just sell it. Tell us how it is. Good morning. So today is day 3 of the challenge, and yesterday actually went quite well. I didn't really film much because I was out of the house, but let's look at my notebook to see what it is that I was able to do. So first of all, I spent 70 minutes on Link reading my German novel. I am going to talk about the novel a little later. I also spent 14 minutes on my 100 days of reading in Italian challenge. I also spent 3 hours listening to the audiobook. It was 2 hours 59 minutes to be precise, and I did finish it. I actually really enjoyed the audiobook, and I'm even thinking about watching the movie because apparently there's a movie that was made based on the book. So after finishing the audiobook, I basically finished it on my way to my Italian class, and when I arrived I still had about 10 minutes before the class started. So I spent those 10 minutes on reading a short story by Natalia Ginzburg called Madre or La Madre, I'm not 100% sure. Then the class itself lasted for 90 minutes. I also spent about 26 minutes in the morning doing homework for the class, and then on my way back, because I had already finished the audiobook and I didn't want to start a new one, I decided to listen to a couple of episodes of a podcast that I really enjoy. So all of that I think amounted to over 7 hours, but I will need to do the math more precisely just to not give you a wrong number. So what am I doing today? Today I actually don't need to leave the house. I am going to gym later in the evening, but for most of the day I can just work from home and study from home. So I currently have 2 books in my target languages that I'm reading. One of them, I think I've talked about it already. So this one is a little tricky because I think I've said it before. It kind of put me into a reading slump. I am trying to gain some momentum with it, but I only read for like 15 minutes yesterday, 14. But whenever I have two books and there's one that I'm not super excited about, I kind of tend to compensate by going super hard on the other one. And that's what I'm going to be doing. Well, this is my iPad. This is what I'm going to be doing with my German book. So the German novel that I'm reading right now, let me see the title. I think it's called The Judge and His Executioner in English. So it's called Der Richter und sein Henker. And basically, it is a crime novel. We have this older policeman who's about to retire, and he's seriously sick, so he has to spend some time in the hospital. And while he's there, he doesn't have much to do, so he goes through a pile of old magazines. And in one of them, he finds an article about this Nazi doctor who basically conducted a bunch of surgeries on prisoners, surgeries without anesthesia. And when he's reading the article, his own doctor comes to see how he's doing, and he asks his doctor, like, do you know about this Nazi? And when he asks that and he shows him the picture, he kind of can tell from the reaction that there's something wrong. So he asks his friend if he knows that doctor, and his friend says that he knows someone who looks very much like this doctor, but it couldn't be him because that person that he knows was in Chile during the war. But the policeman is not really satisfied with this answer, so he kind of starts an investigation. And so far, it has been pretty interesting. I would say it is definitely way above my level, so we're just going at it one sentence at a time. But I think this book is exactly what I look for when I basically only just start reading in a language, because it has a story that makes me want to keep going and makes me want to find out what's gonna happen. So I think my goal for today is to maybe spend like another hour, maybe an hour and a half reading this book and make a dent in it, and then also spend some time reading my Italian book, because God knows I need to finish it by the end of this week. I can't spend another week reading this book. So this is day 4, and I just wanted to give you a little recap of what it is that I managed to do yesterday. I spent 4 hours and 31 minutes on language learning, so I did spend some time with this book, and I'm trying to make a dent in it. You can tell, excuse the dog hair, you can probably tell at this point that a little bit over halfway through, but honestly, I wish I could tell you that I'm getting into it. Like, I'm not. I find this book, I don't want to say incredibly boring, but that is exactly how I'm finding it so far. When I first read the premise of the book, it sounded really, really interesting, but the thing is that so far, and I've read like a little bit over half of the book. There's nothing happening in the book, really. Whenever I find a book that is challenging to read, I always think, oh, but that's just because I'm not a native speaker and I don't have enough experience reading different kinds of books, you know. But today, because I just needed some sense of validation, I guess, so I went on Goodreads and I started looking specifically at ratings that were like 3 stars, because I don't think the book is terrible, but there's just really nothing happening, and the writing style makes it so difficult to get through. And I read some reviews written in Italian, so I imagine by native Italian speakers most likely, and I felt very vindicated to find out that even native Italian speakers struggle with his writing style. But I did read another book. This graphic novel by Paco Roca called Arrugas has been on my list for like a couple of months at this point. But oh my God, I ended up crying so much. Like, the book is very, very short. I think it took me about 50 minutes to finish it. But it is such a sad book. Yeah, I was like crying so much. What we have here is Emilio, who has worked at a
bank for like all of his life, but now he's 72, he has Alzheimer's, and his family basically surrenders him to like an institution. And throughout the book we see Emilio making friends, looking at other people, and kind of experiencing that dread of knowing that that is exactly what is waiting for you. And also we see his illness progress, which is really, really heartbreaking. And as far as what I'm planning to do today, I am going to continue reading my German novel for sure. I'm getting a little tired of podcasts. Like the first couple of days, I felt very productive doing things around the house and listening to podcasts or audiobooks, but now I just kind of feel overwhelmed. So I don't really think I will be doing a lot of it. And that means that I have to be very, very, I guess, intentional with my time, because again, audio content like podcasts or audiobooks is like the easiest thing to do to get the number of hours I want to, but I also don't want to do it at the expense of my very fragile mental state, so I don't want to overwhelm myself. We'll see. And I do want to do some grammar today because I was actually hoping to do much more of it than I have been doing. And what else? I don't know. Maybe there's something else that I'm forgetting about right now, but we'll see. So I just got this package in the mail, and I believe these are some books that I ordered. There should be 2 books, and one of them is actually in Italian. So let's see. Okay, so I got the book. Oh my God, why did they put this? It is actually very cute. Look at those cows. Anyways, here's the book I got. I got a Giorni dell'abbandono by Elena Ferrante. Elena Ferrante is the person who wrote L'amica geniale, or My Brilliant Friend. I do have a paperback of L'amica geniale, but I think last time I tried reading it was a year ago, and it felt like it would be too difficult, especially a physical copy. And so I decided to read one of her books, but as an ebook, and I read, I think, La vita bugiarda degli adulti, if I remember correctly. If I remember the title correctly. I definitely know that that was the book that I read. Anyways, I did like the book, and this is like her other standalone novel, so I want to read maybe one more book by her before I finally get to My Brilliant Friend. And I also know that there's a movie based on this book, and it's actually on Canopy, which is a service that I use to occasionally watch movies or shows through my library subscription for free. So it would be actually nice. I don't like watching movies before I read the book, if I'm planning to read the book, that is. But if I read the book, I don't mind watching the movie then. So I think if anything, I would be more interested in the movie if I have already read the book.
¿Y cuál es la disciplina del montaje?
Bueno, pues tiene que ver también con Cuba. Mi relación con la isla, aparte que mi abuelo paterno era cubano, tiene que ver con mis estudios en la Escuela San Antonio de los Baños. Y ahí aprendí.
So at this point, I'm pretty sure you've noticed that I have skipped a couple of days, but only in terms of filming. I did continue the challenge, and let's look at the results. So I ended up spending 31 hours and 9 minutes. Unfortunately, I did not really calculate the split between German and Italian, but I'm sure at this point you already know that it was mostly Italian. I'm also not going to go through the list of all the things that I did during the weekend, but I am going to leave this table that I used to calculate the time total so that you guys can see for yourself. Let's look at the things that stand out and the things that I kind of took away from the challenge. So first of all, listening. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this was both the easiest and the hardest part of the challenge. The easiest for obvious reasons, I think, but also it was pretty hard for me because I used to be the kind of person who, from the moment that they wake up, has something playing in their earphones, like be it a YouTube video, a podcast, an audiobook. I would listen to things in the background all the time, even if I was working. And I am not that kind of person anymore. I think about 2 years ago, I decided to give myself a break, and not like a temporary break, from audio input. And I made a deliberate effort to listen to things less. And since then, I'm not really used to getting so much audio input. So I would say that by Wednesday, I was starting already to feel quite overstimulated. So as much as it was nice to feel productive and to finish an audiobook in like 2 days, that's definitely not going to be something that I keep in my language learning routine moving forward, not to the same extent. Another thing that was kind of a negative, or maybe at least it didn't go as expected, was that instead of adding to my normal language learning activities, I actually ended up neglecting some of them. So for example, one of those activities was working on my grammar textbook, and I initially expected that I would continue doing that every single day. But I guess subconsciously, pretty soon into the challenge, I started gravitating towards activities that were easier to do for an extended period of time. And usually a study session with my grammar textbook takes only anywhere from like 25 to 50 minutes, but it also takes a lot of brain power. And so you can imagine that listening to a podcast is something that you can do for quite longer, and it doesn't necessarily require that same amount of mental energy. And so I feel like I started neglecting my grammar studies in order to be able to do things for longer. And that's not necessarily something that I aim towards in my normal routine. So that was also one thing that I wasn't 100% happy about. However, what I did really appreciate about this challenge is the number of books that I have finished. And I guess here what I care about is not even the number, but the fact that I read so much that I've been able to get out of this reading slump that I had been in for, I would say, like definitely a couple of weeks. And all of the books that I finished this week, they were meaningful in their own way. So for example, the audiobook, don't remember the author's name, I think it's Niccolò Magniti. I've been curious about him and his work for quite a while. And so the fact that I finally got to listen to one of his novels and that I actually enjoyed it is a pretty big deal to me. Another 2 books that I finished in Italian, because I did finish Il Giardino dei Finzi-Contini over the weekend, were a book that, like I said, kind of put me into a reading slump. And so finishing them was also really important, because now I can move on to other things that I have on my list. And then finally, Arrugas, that I read in Spanish. I don't really read a lot of books. I think this year I maybe have read like 5 books in Spanish total. So yeah, I guess the fact that I was able to continue working not just on the goals that I have in terms of reading, but also to add something extra, namely a book in Spanish, was pretty cool, if you ask me. And then, of course, another thing that I really liked was doing this challenge with Joe as some kind of an accountability partner. I don't necessarily think I need one in terms of language learning. Again, like I said, I have had no problem, especially this year, being consistent with at least one of my target languages. But when it comes to this YouTube thing, you guys, if you watch this channel, you do know that I could benefit from some accountability. So that aspect was also really refreshing and really nice. And thank you so much for watching this very, very long video. Definitely check out Joe's vlog, and I hope to see you in my next video whenever it comes out. Bye bye.